Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the stage. Hopefully, we'll get a minute or two for everyone to jump over here. But welcome to our closing keynote here. Hopefully, you guys learned some stuff in our sessions today. I was popping around all of the sessions today, and I wanted to be in all of them. Just know we've had the question come up. We will put together a package for all of the video, as well as any slides that might have been shared during the presentations. So all the recordings and the slides that were presented will be given out at some point in the future once we get them all together and figure out how to disperse them. So just keep that in mind, because I know that question has come up a bunch of different times. Otherwise, I'm really hoping that you guys got some good information. I definitely learned some stuff about League of Legends. Definitely learned some stuff about how to coach League of Legends at a higher level. That's one thing I always struggle with. And then I, was popped into the collegiate coaches channel and, learned a few things about how they're doing. And then besides that, just popping around, making sure everyone was having a good time. And it looked like everyone was doing really well. Hopefully you guys met some people in networking. We do have some sessions tomorrow set up just for networking. So that way you can kind of get to meet some new people. So just keep that in mind. Use that networking tab. It's pretty cool. I jumped in a couple of them in the first session while we were getting stuff set up. So definitely check that out. And if you guys have any feedback for us, we will have a survey coming out on Thursday. We'll send it out to everyone who attended. So without further ado, I do want to welcome Dr. Lindsey Migliore. She is also known as the Gamer Doc. She is going to be talking about inclusion in esports, and she'll tell you a lot about where she comes from and her background. Here, I will turn the stage over to you.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you for inviting me and putting the attention on this important issue. There's not a lot of people talking about this. There should be more people talking about this. So having a talk like this is really important. So I'll jump into it. Like Todd said, my name is Dr. Lindsey Migliore. I am an esports medicine doctor. I started an esports medicine company a couple years ago. I treat professional video gamers. I treat casual video gamers. I just wrote a book on esports medicine. So if you are a coach or a player who wants to learn a little bit more about what kind of injuries you can get from playing video games, buy my book. It's called Handbook of Esports Medicine. It's available on Amazon or direct from Springer.com. Either one. I'm also the executive director of Queer Women of Esports, and that is one of the reasons I am here today. So I went to medical school. To be a doctor, you have to go to medical school. But fun fact, I almost didn't go to medical school. I was playing video games, playing a lot of video games. I was playing Call of Duty on Xbox, all through college. And I was getting kind of good. I was getting pretty good, like not to toot my own horn, I was getting pretty good. And this was back when the MLG was really big. And I had a bunch of friends who were competing competitively. And, we were going to LAN tournaments together and I was winning and I was doing well. But this was right around the time when Call of Duty still had open lobbies. And had open comms after you would kill your opponent. So if you don't remember those days, don't YouTube it. It's terrible. But when you joined a match, before you would go into the game itself, the whole lobby's comms would be open. And it was exactly what you would imagine. And as soon as I opened my voice, right, what would people say? Like, are you a squeaker? Are you a girl? And it was also right around the time that I was coming out. And so it started to get a little too much for me. I just wanted to play video games. I just wanted to do that as my career, but that stuff started to affect my mental health. So I stopped playing multiplayer games for like a pretty long time, like 5 years. I quit offline or online video games and I did my backup plan. I went to medical school. In the long run, it's good. I'm back in esports. But when people tell me that esports doesn't have an inclusion problem, I know it's not true, right? I know it's not true because it happened to me. And I'm not saying that because I'm a woman or because I'm queer, the toxicity was more. Everyone gets toxicity in gaming, right? But that shouldn't be acceptable. So, it happens to a lot of people. It happens to a lot of people like me, especially if you've been paying attention to the news this week, last week. But esports has an inclusion problem. It does. The top esports earner, if you looked at the top esports earners in 2019, in the top 500, there was one woman, Scarlett. If you look at the top 500 esports earners in 2020, there aren't any women. Female athletes in video gaming earn 0.7 cents to their male counterparts dollar. So you get $1, women get not even a penny in terms of how much they get paid. If you look at the composition of teams, people look a certain way, right? There's lots of people of Asian descent. There's lots of people who are white and all dudes. And then if you look at the C-suites of esports organizations, everyone looks pretty similar as well. And this isn't just at the pro level, right? So there was this really cool paper that came out last year, and it looked at the makeup, the diversity of collegiate esports. And they found that when there were student-run clubs, the diversity was incredible, right? There was women, men, people from all backgrounds. And then when you look at teams that were funded by the college, that diversity was gone. It looked exactly like the pro level. So collegiate esports has a problem too. And when I talk about the problem, I'm not talking about there being too much of something, right? Because inclusion isn't about exclusion. I'm not saying there should be less men involved in esports. I'm just saying there should be more women involved, right? There's enough games for everyone. There's enough teams for everyone. So when you look up the makeup, of these teams, of these orgs, if you look at the earners overall, why? And this is the question we're going to ask a lot in the next 45 minutes. And I would really encourage you guys to think about it too, because oftentimes when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about equity, when we talk about diversity, if you're the person who's included, it can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because when I'm saying we need more women in esports, sometimes what people hear is we need less men. And that's not the case at all, right? That's not the case at all. So if you're a person who is included in esports, all I'm asking is that you just ask why, right? Why? So when we look at the makeup of these teams, players, orgs, we have two options, right? One is white and Asian men are smarter, more qualified, and better than their female and BIPOC counterparts. Better at gaming, better at marketing, better at running an organization, right? That's option one. Option two is there are barriers to inclusion, right? Because those are your only options. Those are the only options. Everything else is not true, right? And of course, right? Of course, we know number one isn't true, right? We know this isn't true because there's no genetic component. There's no testosterone advantage. We know this isn't true. Scientifically, I'm not talking about like anything else other than scientifically. So before we look at the barriers, we need to talk about the current state of esports, all right? So according to Newzo, 13% of gamers identify as queer, 45% of gamers are women, and 33% are Black, Hispanic, or Asian. This is a terrible, terrible lumping, right? You can't lump that in gaming. You can't lump those categories in gaming. And this is another issue that we're talking about is how data is collected in video gaming. Because in order to make changes, we have to collect data, right? Because this is going to be another theme for this talk is, of course we should do things because it feels right. But we have to do things correctly. We have to do things with data. So this is what gaming looks like. It's pretty reflective of the population as a whole, right? But then when we look at, 45% of gamers are women. What are they playing? What are women playing? And these are the engagement among key titles. So we see that there's less engagement in what we call tier level esports, like Dota, Hearthstone, Call of Duty, League of Legends, CSGO. I don't know if you think Fortnite's a tier level esport. And there's more engagement in more mobile games and games that aren't necessarily considered tier level esports, right? So now let's look at the current state of esports. So according to, I don't know how to say this, Nielsen, in 2006, 81% of esports viewers were men and 15% were women. And then in 2020, this number changed a little bit, right? We see more women getting involved in esports. Okay. So if we look at the racial demographics, what level of interest do people have in esports? And we see actually in non-white individuals, the interest level is high. It's high, right? It is high. So, from these data, gaming is diverse and esports isn't yet, right? It isn't yet. And that's okay because you have to start somewhere, right? You have to start somewhere. So why isn't esports diverse? Right, what are the barriers that exist to inclusion? And hopefully the wheels in your mind are starting to turn, because this is the stuff we're talking about. We got to get to the root of this stuff because that's how you study it. So the one reason is there is a lack of support for those in power. And I'm not saying that this is intentional. This does not have to be intentional, right? You automatically go towards and are gravitated towards someone who looks like you, who talks like you, who has the same interests as you. We know that scientifically. So if I am in power and I have a position opening, if I hire someone who looks like me, who acts like me, who has the same interest as me, that doesn't make me a bad person, right? But if you're in a position of power, you have a duty, right? You have a duty to try and expand that. Sometimes it is intentional, unfortunately. So there's this really cool Halo study from a couple of years back, and these researchers took two characters, right? So they took one character and they had a computer program a bunch of words that you would say in a game, like good game, or, where are we going, or player flanking. And they had them generate those phrases in male and female voices. And they put them into thousands of online games, and they had the computer play a certain level. So it was all standardized, right? And so they looked at how people on the team spoke to those characters, right? How people spoke to those characters. So for the male computer, no matter how well they played, the responses were relatively the same. If they were playing a little bit better, maybe they got more praise. If they were playing worse, maybe someone told them to play better. But when you looked at the female, the female character, right, the female voice playing at the same level as the male computer, they received a lot more hate, right? They did. But the interesting part about this is they received the most hate and the most negative chat and toxicity in chat from lower skilled male players. The lower the skill level of the Halo player, the more likely they were to talk negatively at the female computer player, right? The higher skilled male players didn't. They didn't, right? And that's because there's this perception that there is a finite amount of resources, right? There's a finite amount of resources, and the people up at the lower skill level benefit from exclusion, right? If I need to think about it as the Hunger Games, right? 5 players are allowed in the Hunger Games. The lowest skill level player, all of a sudden we say, hey, we're going to open up the Hunger Games. 5 more players are coming in. The lowest skill level player is going to be like, no, you're not. I want to live. I want to survive. And so that's what we see in video gaming. A large amount of toxicity comes from lower skill level players because they are afraid that they will lose more from inclusion, right? So think about that. Think about that. I think that's so cool. Science. So the first reason we see exclusion is the lack of support from people in power. And the other one, and this is the one that we can address issues, is a lack of training and experience from those who want to enter esports, right? And this is the hardest one to grasp sometimes, because if you're a head esports coach for your college and you have a job, one assistant coaching job, and you have 10 applicants, and you're hiring the most qualified candidate. You're hiring the most qualified candidate, right? That most qualified candidate is, why are they qualified? Why are they the most qualified? And it's because of the experience and the qualifications they got along the way. What if there's a barrier at every single level? For a variety of reasons I'm going to talk about, right? Why do they have, and oftentimes it's the male, right? It's the male candidate. Why do they have more experiences than their female counterpart? And that's what we're going to talk to. That's what we're going to talk about. So once again, it goes back to why, right? Is that because that female candidate is less qualified, not as smart, and just worse compared to little male counterparts, or is it because there are barriers to inclusion, right? So let's talk about the barriers, because some of you are sitting at home and like, this seems made up. This seems made up. You have to trust me, I'm a doctor. I can't lie legally. So what are the barriers? Awareness. Awareness is a huge one. The first one is that people don't know that barriers exist, right? If you don't know they exist, how can you prevent them? If you don't know they exist, how can you prevent them? A great one is I showed up, I was hired by Georgetown and to do my doctor job. And I showed up and they said, okay, what size scrubs are you? And I was like, oh, I'm extra small. They're like, oh, we don't have extra smalls. I was like, okay, what sizes do you have? They're like, we have men's mediums. I'm like, how can I do my job in clothes that are too big for me, right? But they didn't realize that because they hadn't hired a woman in 6 years. They didn't realize that their scrubs didn't fit me. Were they trying to be mean? No, of course not. They just didn't have any awareness, right? So awareness that barriers exist is the first one. And there's really is a lack of discussion around privilege, and that's because sometimes we get uncomfortable. We get uncomfortable when we talk about privilege, right? But that's okay, because this is a safe little space. I'm not going to judge you. You guys can ask me questions at the end. No judgment here. Safe space. One of the other barriers is generational. So think about this. High-level esports are played on PCs. How do you get good at PC gaming? You have to have a PC at home that you can use for gaming. What if your parents can't afford a computer? What if they can only afford one computer, but the adults in the household need it to work? What if you can afford a computer, but you can't afford high-speed internet access? What if you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have high-speed internet access, right? And this is the reason that we see diversity in the fighting games community, but we don't see it in the PC gaming community. And that's because of the generational lack of access to PCs and to high-speed internet. So, if you're a kid and you want to play video games and your parents can't afford a PC, you probably have a buddy who has a console, right? So you can go over to their house and you can play Tekken, but you can't play League of Legends at home, right? So this is a big barrier. This is a big barrier we see in esports. And even so, lack of knowledge once you get the thing. So if you give a kindergartner a gaming PC, they're gonna have no idea what to do, right? Because they don't have the training. They don't have the knowledge and the know-how to use it. So sometimes we see people throw like $5,000 at an issue and they're like, boom, Pride Month, $5,000, done. What is that money doing, right? Are you providing training? You're providing resources. So you have to have training too. So these generational issues, this one is kind of the hardest one to address, because you have to address a lot of things like, the internet gap in low-income areas. In-game. So stereotype roles, right? You're a lady, you're playing support. You must like Mercy, right? You're going to support my ADC. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Linguistic profiling in chat. This is a big word for higher pitched voices get spoken over more. It doesn't matter if you're younger, if you're a man with a higher pitched voice. We do test and test and test and test. Higher pitched voices will get spoken over more. Lower pitched voices will be listened to more, right? Lack of representation in characters and avatars. If you hypersexualize your female characters in the game, how do you think your players are going to act, right? Competition. So skill level perception. People who play supports are seen as less skilled than their ADC counterparts, right? Stereotype threat. I love this one so much. So stereotype threat is this thing where if you are aware a stereotype exists, you are more likely to fulfill that stereotype. So if I tell you, I say, women are bad at math, and you go take a math test and you're a woman, you're going to do worse on that math test. And here's the cool part. Here's what they did. So these researchers took avatars and they made a female avatar and they made a male avatar, right? And so then they had these test subjects and they had a bunch of people playing the female avatar and a bunch of people playing the male avatar, right? Men, women, it didn't matter. They went in. So if you were playing the female avatar, the researchers went up to you and said, female gamers, women, are worse at math than men. The characters who played, and then they had the avatars go and do math problems in the game. The characters who had female characteristics, it didn't matter if the test subject, it didn't matter if the person controlling that avatar was male or female, performed worse on the math test compared to their male avatars. So the women who are playing male avatars did better on math tests than the men who are playing female avatars, right? You have to tell them right beforehand, you're bad at math because you're a woman. Your character is going to be worse at math. And it happens, right? So we have the stereotype out there that women are bad at gaming. If you say that, if that's a stereotype, women are going to be worse at gaming because of stereotype threat. They're going to be less likely to enter competitions. They're going to be less likely to show up to your scrims, to your tryouts, because that stereotypes exist, right? Also, accessibility to competitions. So if you're traveling with your team, do you have a female chaperone available? Do you have different facilities for your male and women, or for your men and women gamers, right? Who's coming on the trip? These are all like things that we can think about. Cancel culture. So cancel culture is reactionary. It doesn't focus on growth and learning. So if someone's listening to this talk and they say, I'm going to do better with my club. I'm going to do better. And you try. Guess what? You're probably going to mess up. And that's okay. That's okay because you're trying. Once you step out of your comfort zone, you're going to mess up. But then it gets on Twitter and everyone's like, you're an idiot. Twitter does its thing. And all of a sudden you feel bad and you feel worse and you're not going to try again. Cancel culture is a huge barrier. People don't want to be mean. They don't want to be jerks. They don't want to be exclusionary. They just only know what they were told and what they grew up with, right? So we have to provide a judgment-free space to learn. And if you are an esports coach who knows exactly what I'm talking about right now and is like, doesn't need to write anything down, it's like, I've heard this one before. Provide a judgment-free space for your players to come to the same conclusions, right? That's important. Teams. Okay, so we have a really vibrant Discord server in Queer Women of Esports, and a lot of the players we get come from teams that they were pushed out of. And what happens is this one player, she was playing Overwatch, and she wanted to play one character. She wanted to, DPS, and her teammate was like, no, you got to support. He hopped in a private chat with her on Discord and was like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm a man, you're a woman. This is how things works. Do what I say. She recorded it. Because she was a smart woman. She brought it to her coach, and her coach said, this is our first time as an esports club. If I bring this up to my administration, it's not going to look good. Like, don't rock the boat. Just leave it alone. I'll talk to him, blah, 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 right? Don't rock the boat. Don't make waves. That team attitude is terrible. It's so toxic. Recruitment. So how do you recruit things? How do you recruit? Where are you recruiting? Where are you putting your flyers? Who follows you on Twitter? Who do you follow on Twitter? How are you recruiting? Lack of code of conduct. Every esports team and club should have a code of conduct of how their players are expected to behave, right? An 18-year-old, if you have an 18-year-old on your team, you know the wide range of emotional maturity they can have. Some of them can be wise beyond their years, and some of them not so much, right? So it has to be clear to them how they are expected to act. It has to be clear. And if they break those rules, there has to be clear consequences. Pronouns. So on a team, just ask pronouns. It's so easy. Just ask pronouns. Put it on their intake form. It's not preferred pronouns. Remember, it's not preferred pronouns. It's just pronouns because it's not a preference. It's the way they are. Gaming. What games are you playing? What games are you playing right now on your esports team? Are you only playing Activision Blizzard games? That's an issue right now, right? People aren't playing those games right now. Also a focus on tier level esports. This means that, and whatever you think on this is whatever you think on this. But there is more participation in the FGSC and non-tier level esports. And, if you only have a certain amount of funding and you're going to focus on the tier level esports, good on you. But if you have a little bit more funding, getting a team that isn't one of those main teams will allow a little bit more inclusion. Okay, so now what? We know the barriers that exist. What do we do about it? DEI training. Every single coach should have at least a little bit of DEI training. DEI stands for diversity, equity, inclusion. It's also abbreviated as like DE&I, or however people want to call it. But everyone should just have a little bit, just a little bit. So we're going to do 1 minute of DEI training. Biological sex. What does that mean? It is the classification of a person as male or female. It's assigned at birth. It's put on your birth certificate. It's based on external genitalia, right? Doctor looks down at baby, says male, puts it on the birth certificate. That's it. Scientifically, this is not always correct. What your internal chromosomes are does not always match your external chromosomes. Scientifically, we know that exists. We know that exists. So this differs from gender identity. Gender identity is a person's sense of their gender, right? And this is where the confusion sometimes happens. People say, a man or woman, right? They forget about the difference between biological sex and gender identity. And I know that some people in their mind right now are like, it doesn't matter what you think. This is what happens. This is what exists. These are the kids who you're going to encounter, right? The generation below us is so different than us. They are so different. You got to know this stuff for them. You got to, just for them. And if you want to be a good coach, you have to be a good coach to everybody, just not the people who you agree with, right? It's so important. So for transgender people, this often means their biological sex is different from their gender identity, often the reverse. So this is a really important thing that a lot of people get wrong. If someone says trans man, you don't have to ask any more questions. Trans man means most of the time their pronouns are he, him, and they identify as a man, right? This is also called AFAB, right? So assigned female at birth, assigned female at birth. People don't really use that. So trans man usually means assigned female at birth, and usually means that they go by he, him pronouns. Trans woman, they're a woman. Usually means she, her pronouns. Usually means assigned male at birth. Non-binary, this one is definitely evolving, but it's fluidity between the two genders. They don't identify as man. They don't identify as female. They often use they, them pronouns, but that's not always the case, right? It's important not to assume. And the best thing that you can do if you're not sure is ask, hey, what are your pronouns? Hey, what are your pronouns? Right? People will be so happy that you asked that. The people who have problems with being mispronounced. And genderqueer is kind of just a catch-all term. Under that falls a lot of other things. That's outside of the scope of our practice. So pearls, please keep in mind not every queer individual uses their legal or given birth name. And what a dead name is oftentimes refers to the name that a trans person was born with. Using their dead name when they've given you another name to use is considered highly disrespectful, right? It's so easy. It's so simple. Just ask them what they want to be called. Ask them what their pronouns is, and you're done. You don't have to deal with any of this. You're done. And not everyone is public. So if someone comes out to you in a private environment, that doesn't mean they want the whole team to know, right? So if someone comes up to you and is like, hey, I want you to call me Tony now. You're like, okay, I'll call you Tony, blah, 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 blah. And, just make sure that the information you're sharing is meant to be shared. Because as a coach, you're often their confidant. You're the person they look up to. And betraying their confidence might be catastrophic for them. Sexual orientation. This is their emotional, sexual, romantic attraction to another person. LGBTQ. So this is not the same as gender identity. That's obvious, right? And what people say is it okay to say queer? Is it okay to say queer? And I get that question a lot because our org name is Queer One of Esports. And queer is a term in transition, right? 20 years ago, it was used as a derogatory term. And now it's being reclaimed by the community. So if you're wondering if it's okay, just don't use it. But if someone else is using it, feel free to use it in the same respect they are. But just remember, we all used to play Smear the Queer as a kid, right? Can't play that game anymore. Got to call it something else. Race versus ethnicity. This is something I am much less qualified to talk about, but I will talk about the just the basics. Race refers to the societal categorization based on physical appearance, heritage, genetics, things like that. Whereas ethnicity is their identification. The best description is race is something that is believed to be heritable. We know from genetics testing that's not always the case. Where ethnicity is learned. We had a situation once where the kid wanted to be known by a different name and their parents didn't want them to call that, and the teachers got stuck in the middle. Yeah. And I think that, Kevin, I think that means like, what type of coach do you want to be? And do you want to be the coach who, goes with the parents, or do you want to be the coach who gets the kids confidence? And that's a really hard situation. But like, if it were me, I think that I would want my coach to call me by the name I want to be called by, because I'm sure if you didn't, that would drive like a big barrier between you and them, which would be harder for them to coach. That's a really hard situation. So, DEI training was the first one. There you go. There's your 1 minute DEI training. Another thing we can do is set universal standards, right? Everyone should have a code of conduct. Everyone should have a code of conduct. If you don't have a code of conduct, go to anykey.org and look up the Keystone Code. And there's a code of conduct right there for you, 1 page. Print it out, laminate it, pop it on your lab's wall, have all your kids sign it. It's super easy. It's 1 page. You have to establish the norms. Hey, we're not going to discriminate against each other. Hey, we're not going to use these terms when we talk about each other. These are the things we're gonna do as a team. This is our team culture. Accountability is also really important. You got to have a zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance policy for harassment, right? That's the way everyone's moving. You got to have reporting procedures as well, because what if someone's not comfortable going to you? Who do they go to then? So having a code of conduct, and at the bottom of it saying, if you have a problem, go to this person. If you're not comfortable, go to this person. So easy. It's so easy. Title IX enforcement is going to be a big thing coming up, right? So in the last administration, the Title IX got gutted. If you don't know what Title IX is, it's basically you have to fund your team, your male teams, the same as your female teams, or some iteration of that. Esports is going to eventually fall under this, and it's going to be an issue if your esports team is all one demographic. That could be a violation of Title IX in the future under the Biden administration. They're still working on it though, but just as a heads up. So addressing generational issues, like I said, this is much harder to deal with because we're talking about huge disparities that have existed for years and years and years. But a really good way is to ensure that everyone in your school has access to PCs and high-speed internet. So one thing is, if you have practice once, however many times a week, if you can get that lab for an extra hour and then have an open practice and be like, hey, anyone who wants to try a new game, come in and try this new game. And give them training, give them the opportunity. Partnering with local centers that will have high-speed internet access and PCs is also great, but this is not something that you as an esports coach is going to have like a huge ability to deal with. So I'm sorry for that. Mitigation of stereotype threats. So if you have a really good player on your team who is a woman, show everyone, tell the school, right? Put them on your social media, uphold them. And then all the girls at that school are going to be like, hey, she's good at video games. I can be good at video games. And you're going to mitigate that stereotype threat. That's a really easy thing to do. Sponsorship. Actively uplifting. Sponsorship and mentorship are two different things. Mentorship is giving somebody advice. Sponsorship is giving them opportunities, right? You have an assistant coaching position or an assistant coaching position, unpaid, 10 hours a week, not a lot of responsibilities. Give that to someone who's not the most qualified, but the most motivated. Just try it. See what happens, right? Sponsorship is not just sharing the mic. It's giving the mic away and not taking it back, right? So this is my favorite part of the talk because, I'm an esports medicine doctor, and one of the things that I teach is healthy gaming, right? You should warm up before gaming. You should do these stretches before gaming. You should cool down after gaming. You should eat right. Here's what you should eat. And I started off being like, you should do this because it'll make you healthier. No one cares about that. No one cares about being healthier. So I changed my tune and I said, do this because it's going to make you perform better. And that has made all the difference. So I would love to say, do these things. Oh, nice. Thank you for the NEK pledge. I would love to say you should do all these things because it's the right thing to do, right? But that's not always motivating for most people. So it's the smart thing to do. And I'm going to tell you why it's the smart thing to do. There is a huge untapped market out there in esports and video gaming. Huge, huge. Women drive 83% of consumer purchases in the general market, right? If you want to sell some merch, right? If you want to sell your team jerseys to people, you got to engage the female buyers. You got to. Also the LGBTQIA population, if you're making people feel comfortable, they're going to spend more money, and queer families have more money, right? So 80% of queer individuals have incomes above the national average, and 40% of them have individual incomes over $100,000. Engage these markets because it's financially beneficial. Do you need money for your esports team? Do you need money for your esports club? Do a pride event. See how much money you make, right? And do it correctly. Don't just do it for a pride event. And I'm going to tell y'all a story about Subaru. So in the early 1990s, Subaru was faltering as a car company. They did a market survey and they found that people thought their cars were sturdy but drab. So they hired this fancy marketing company and they said, let's sell more cars. And so the marketing company went through and looked at who was buying these sturdy but drab cars. And they found that it was teachers, outdoorsy people, and small pockets of women unmarried women who lived in Massachusetts, the Pacific Northwest, and certain areas of California and Massachusetts. I said Massachusetts. And when they did these, they pulled all these people into focus groups and they said, why do you like our cars? And everyone looks around the room and they're like, they're all gay. And this is the early 1990s. Ellen DeGeneres hadn't come out yet. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is still not out yet, right? Not a lot of people are out yet. And so Subaru said, wow, lesbians are buying our cars. How do we make a marketing platform to capitalize on this? And so instead of like shrinking their cars and making them pink like Bic did, they did this marketing campaign. Look at this marketing campaign in the 1990s. It's so subtle that if you are a closeted gay person, you don't feel like you can't buy this car and face ridicule, right? The license plate said things like Xena Lover or P-Town, right? They targeted this community in a way that evoked pride. Flash forward to the recession. Subaru was the only US car company that didn't lose market shares, right? Subaru is thriving. And now it's not just the queer community that's buying their cars. It's the families of queer communities. It's people who support queer people and just people who want to buy Subarus. Brand loyalty is huge for women. And it's huge for queer individuals. So if you have an esports club that is known for being open and accepting and inclusive, you will have more fans. You will have more fans, you will have more loyal fans, and you will have more fans that buy more stuff. The other reason is, in order to do anything, in order to build a club, in order to have people come to your stream, have people come to your event, sell tickets, sell things, you have to make people feel comfortable, right? And that's the first step. And if you're in a position of power, that can be really hard to think about, right? Because you feel included. You've always felt included, right? And so the first step that you can do here is hire people who don't look like you. And that one's hard because a lot of times people hear that and think that people are saying that white men are the enemy, which is completely untrue. Inclusion isn't about exclusion. And the fact of the matter is white men aren't doing well right now, right? Suicide rates are highest in middle-aged white men because of the flack they are getting from society and a bunch of other things. It's not the enemy, right? We're not saying that. No one is saying that. All we're saying is we want more people in the room. Because if you're in the room and everyone in the room looks like you and comes from the same background as you, then what's going to happen is you're all going to come to the same conclusion. And you're going to miss stuff that other people won't miss. Like me. Like I am a queer individual, but I'm white, right? I'm a doctor. I've never been mispronounced. I've never had to worry about where my next meal is or if my internet's going to go out. I've never had to worry about that. So if you put people in the room who look differently, you're going to protect yourself and you're going to make better decisions. It'll prevent esports teams, your esport team, from being flamed on Twitter like what's happening right now, right? It protects you. It protects you. So hire people who don't look like you. So the thing is like people are like, okay, well, if I do a pride event, aren't I going to, like I'm in the rural neighborhood. Aren't I going to alienate other people? Gamers are younger and are more liberal on social matters than other people, than adults, and than other people like them. So, you know, it's the way things are. You're not going to alienate your market. And I'm realizing I have 5 minutes left. Luckily, I'm on my last 2 slides. So esports inclusion is smart, right? It's more profitable. It protects against negative PR. It's going to happen. If you are above the trend right now, that's fantastic. And also, it's the right thing to do, right? It's the last one, but it's probably the most important one, but I understand I can't leave with that all the time. So what can you do right now? Ask people's pronouns. Ask their pronouns. Get DEI training as the coach. There's lots of free resources out there that will take no time at all. Create a code of conduct. Offer esports training to people who aren't actively involved in your program. And if you do stream on Twitch, get mods who aren't all the same demographic, right? Ask people from your community to mod who aren't all the same demographic. And that's going to allow you to create a more inclusive stream. I just said a lot. I threw a lot at you guys. Ask me any questions. If you're not comfortable asking me here, you can ask me on any of these platforms. I'm going to pop open the Q&A section right now. Throw anything in there or in events. How do you view the PowerPoint again? Oh, that's from an hour ago. Oh, and that's from backstage. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. Don't look back there. Cool. Oh, wow. Okay. I can figure this out. I did it. So any questions at all you guys might have about this? If not, that means I just did such a stellar job. There's no questions, or people's brains are still reeling from what I said. Just ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. Be okay with being a little bit uncomfortable, right? That's how we get better. That's how we grow as people. Okay, I don't see any questions, and there's none in chat. So that just means I did a stellar job explaining things. Y'all, thank you for listening. I know that this is like a hard topic to listen to sometimes, so I appreciate everyone sticking around. It's going to help you. You know, the Gen Z, they like they like mom jeans. They don't like skinny jeans. They dye their hair weird colors, and they're a little bit more accepting of non-traditional lifestyles. Oh, thank you, Dalton. Appreciate you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Andy. All right, y'all. I am all set. So if you need to reach out to me, please do on any of these forums. I'm very happy to talk about this stuff. Come talk to your club, anything you guys need. And if you do have individuals who are queer and you want to direct them to Queer Women of Esports, we are a very open, inclusive community where we just create a safe space for people to game, and everyone's welcome. And you don't have to be queer. Allies are very welcome. All right, y'all. Have a fantastic, fantastic rest of your evening, and I will see you later.